Hi class, welcome to another Photoshop activity. Today I'm going to be introducing your next project, which I'm super excited about. You're going to have the opportunity to design a billboard for Southwest Tech's marketing department. And there's even a chance that your billboard could be selected and displayed within the Southwest Tech District. So, cool opportunity. Let's go ahead and check out what this project is all about. So, information on this project can be found in the Week 5 folder. We're going to be looking at these Project 2 details for Billboard. So as I mentioned, you're creating a billboard advertisement. And you're working with through the Southwest Tech Marketing Department. They'll actually be reviewing some of your initial phases of the project and providing you some feedback and things like that. And then once you submit this project, they'll actually review them. And if they like any of them, if they think they could work, they'll be selecting a billboard from your campaign. And in the past, a student's billboard has always been selected. So, cool opportunity. In this project, since you're working with the marketing department, you're going to go through an interview process. And so they're going to answer a ton of questions. And those are kind of already posted here in Schoology for you to look at. And once you go through that interview and read the notes and get a better grasp of this project, you'll go and do some researching and looking for some inspiration, looking at other billboard designs, and then doing some sketches and then presenting a couple sketches with your ideas. And then from there, you'll be working in Photoshop to finish out the billboard. Your final file will be 22.8 inches wide by 10.5 inches high. Though that's very specific dimensions, and that's because we work with a vendor. Typically, our billboard vendor is called Lamar. And you'll actually work with a template file provided from them so that your file is set up correctly. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. The campaign for your billboard is hired before graduation. So typically in the springtime, we like these billboards to go up. Some of our students who are graduating in May are getting jobs before they even graduate. That's really exciting for our students and our employers and our community, and we like to celebrate those students. And so that's the whole campaign for your billboard is hired before graduation. We feature a photo of that student, and then we put their name and the program they're graduating from. So that's a little bit about the project. So step one is that client interview. So you're going to participate in an informal interview with your client. It's a Q&A style interview that's already been predetermined. That interview is already available for you in the week 6 folder. You're going to go ahead and review that assignment. So review all the Q&A questions. Post something that you learned from that Q&A, or if you have more questions, you're going to ask your questions for clarification in that Q&A assignment for the interview. Once you've completed that, you're going to move on to the next assignment, which is the research and sketching. You are going to go research other similar advertising campaigns and find 3 billboard examples that you could use for inspiration. I recommend looking at layout. A layout is not copyrightable. It's the photos, it's the verbiage, it's everything else that is. So if you find a billboard with a cool layout idea, maybe photos on the left and they have this other feature and whatever, you can mimic that idea. That's where you can pull some inspiration from. And then you can kind of change a few things to make it your own. Like maybe you're out of those 3 examples, you like this about one and this about another. And maybe you're going to combine a few things from those examples to make your own. Those are the students who have those billboards selected. Often the best designers, they became very good designers because of always going out and being inspired and researching and looking at other examples. And over time, they've built up this memory bank of good design, and that's what they're pulling from for their ideas. So often our ideas aren't original anymore. They're coming from somewhere. And so that's the practice I really want you to get is pull your idea from something that you can see in this inspiration. And in the end, it's going to look original. Once you've done that, I want you to determine the hierarchy for your billboard. What do you think the viewer should see first? What should they see second? Should they see third? Um, and remember, this is a billboard while people are driving, so you don't have a ton of time to gain that attention. So you really need to figure out what's most important, and that should come from the client interview. What do you think the client thinks is most important? Is it the logo? Is it going to be hired before graduation text? Is it going to be that photo? So those are probably the three things you're debating between. You're then going to produce 5 to 10 thumbnail sketches. Hopefully, your thumbnail sketches are going to show ideas and layout, and those ideas are pulling from your inspiration you found online. You're then going to choose one of your sketches that you like, type a proposal, why you think that sketch works. You're going to present all that information in a Word document. So, your billboard examples you find online, you'll take screenshots, put them in the Word document. The hierarchy you think, what we want you to see first, second, third, you'll put that in the Word document. Your sketches, you can take photographs of them and put those in your Word document. And then your proposal on what you think you want to do. Now, I may choose the sketch you propose. I may say, no, I think you should do this sketch. So just because you're telling me which sketch you want to do doesn't mean your client is going to agree with that. Because remember, it's really what your client wants. And you're working with a real life client this time. So you don't really get to have creative freedom in picking which idea you want to do. That's a big part of our job is doing what our client wants us to do, what our boss wants us to do. And you'll be turning these activities in by those due dates posted in Schoology. So just keep checking the calendar. Then you'll move on to step 3, which is designing your advertisement. So you'll identify that chosen sketch and concept. You're going to use the provided Lamar template. That's in that assets folder. You make sure you have rights to the images that you're using. There will be no AI generated images allowed. However, you can use Adobe stock images. You might have more question on those images. Like, does this have to be a real student? Or is this a stock image? That'll be answered in the Q&A. So gotta go check that out for that question. I also want you to provide 2 versions of your design. I want one version where the student you are highlighting is cut out. You kind of learned how to do selections like that in your project 1, or masked out. And then we want you to do a version where they're not cut out. So often because the cutouts are very difficult for the marketing department because they can't guarantee what photo they get in the end from the actual student that's going to be used. Because your photo is just a placeholder because they don't know yet which students will be highlighted. And sometimes those students submit the photo and they're not great for selections. It's very difficult. And so they can't do a cutout or a selection. So you need to provide an alternate version of your billboard design for those instances. And who knows, maybe no cutout is your favorite. And maybe the cutout is your version just to appease that, because I want you to make sure you are still using the cutouts and knowing how to do that. So you're going to provide each version. Once your billboard design is ready for review, you're going to go through some proofreading processes. You're going to actually email that to your client and they'll give you some feedback. You'll make sure you proofread it, run it through spell check. Remember, if you have spelling and grammar errors, when you submit those for final submission, you'll lose 5% off your overall grade. Make sure you give your client time to review and give feedback. So if this project was due on, I'm just going to throw out dates. These are not actual dates. So let's say this project was due on October 1st. You can't give this to your client on September 29th to review. You need to give them plenty of time to review it, to give you that feedback, and for you to make changes, and possibly to send it to them again. So that's where students often realize how much time it takes. They don't realize, man, it's taking a long time for my client to get back to me. I'm waiting, and yeah, so that's why you need to make sure you leave plenty of time for that. So you'll see due dates in Schoology well in advance before the project is due, beginning that process, so that way you can start learning what that looks like. And then you'll make any necessary revisions based on that review before you submit the final product. When you do submit the final product, you're going to give me the PDS, the PSD file, the working Photoshop file. In that working Photoshop file probably has a layer with a cutout version and a layer with the non-cutout version. So all that can be in one file. You'll also create a billboard mockup. I'm going to let you find a mockup for billboards that you would like to use. You're going to save a PDF of that mockup and submit that PDF here to Schoology along with the Photoshop working file. And those files are due at the beginning of class time or at the time posted on that Schoology due date. Overall, this project is worth 50 points. You can see the breakdown for that. The file setup is 8 points, so that's pretty much using the Lamar template. So some easy points to attain there. Your advertising design, the overall design is worth the majority of the points. Following your client conditions that the client set forth is the other big piece of, or big chunk of those points. You can kind of read through that and review some of the points attained there. Okay, let's check out some of these assets, and then actually I'm gonna hop back in here. You can see, you can find that Q&A in the week 6 folder for the interview, then we'll head there. So project assets, if you look in there, you'll see the template file. I'm just going to open it up for you and download that for you here. I'll kind of I'll show it to you for a second. I'm not going to get into this too much today. That'll be the next video. I'll present more on that document because you're not there yet. You should not be designing anything in Photoshop yet. Students who head straight to their software to start working without going through the researching, the interviewing, the investigating, the sketching, the brainstorming. When you head straight to the software, it does not turn out well, I promise you. You haven't built up enough knowledge or a memory bank of what looks good to be able to go straight to the software and start working. Even good designers don't do that. They still research and investigate and sketch and brainstorm and get those ideas approved before moving forward. So that's why I will show you this file in a previous video, because you shouldn't be here yet. You should be more focused on the interview and on the sketching and on the researching for inspiration. There's another file just showing a little bit more of what that billboard from Lamar proofing stage looks like. And then there's some typefaces here. Let's go ahead and download these typeface files as well, just so you have those when you need them. Otherwise, that's kind of what's in that assets folder. Okay. Let's head to the week 6 folder then. Projects. So there's also an assets folder in the week 6 folder. So I just provided, it's the exact same stuff. I just put them in both places for your convenience. So you either can get the stuff there or you can get the stuff here. I thought maybe since really it's not until the interview's done and the researching is done that people need these assets. So they might be in this week 6 folder before they're actually needing them. So I put them in both locations. So that very first assignment that's due is participating in the client interview. Oftentimes, even with what I just presented there in this project, you have more questions. You need more information. There wasn't enough presented to you. The client doesn't know what you don't know. And so you have to go back and ask more questions. And that's what this is. So more questions have been asked. Like these were actually asked to the marketing department. So this is the question, and the marketing department gave me this response. So this is information coming back from that interview done with them. And so you can kind of read through that, get some information here. If you have additional questions, maybe I didn't ask a question that you actually had, put that down here in the comments, and then I will get you an answer to that question. To earn points for this assignment, you must comment below on something new that you learned with this information. So that's why I'm not trying to tell you everything, because I need you to read through it and find out more for yourself. And so tell me something new that you learned. If you have an additional question, put that in the comments as well, and that's how you'll get your points for this assignment. Also in that week 6 folder is the research and sketches that I already talked about. This might have a few more instructions with that. And here's the assignment where you'll submit that research and sketching and how you'll earn the points for that. Again, if you've got questions on this, you can put it down here in that comments or let me know. I don't always see these right away. So if it's a really important question that you need immediate feedback, maybe send me an email on that too to kind of let me know that you put something there. Okay, so I do want to at least show you that Lamar template. So I'm going to go ahead and open that template that I downloaded. And then I will leave you with a couple of examples of what some students have done in the past. So this is the template from our vendor. And so they're kind of telling you this is the file you're going to use. So when you do get to the phase of designing, this is the file you open. Billboard template.psd. Do not create a new file. You will work from this one. This is kind of showing you guidelines. So that blue teal line, that's your trim line. It's called a bleed. Anything outside the edge of that gets cut off. So gets trimmed off. If you have photos or things, they actually should be extending all the way to this edge, and you have to know that whatever is on this part does get cut off. And I will, in the next video, show you an example of that too, give you a visual. Otherwise, since we've learned about resolution, I do want to explain this kind of your settings a little bit more. Maybe you're like, wow, this is small. This is only 22.8 inches. And here this is telling you 1 inch represents 1 foot. So in the end, this is just under 23 feet actually the live areas would be just under 22 feet, just under 10 feet. So that's the size of that billboard. How are we getting away with this being so much smaller and not to size? And it's common for things this big, you actually reduce this size. So I'm going to come up here to image size, just so you can kind of see. And they're still using a resolution of 300. And maybe you're like, wow, that's still so small. How is this going to be crisp and great detail? Well, it's not, it's really not. You just don't know it because you're viewing it from a car. If you were to get up to these billboards and view them, a foot away, they probably are pixelated a little bit anyway. You just don't see it from that far away. And that's usually what happens when sizes get so big. Either they could have kept the size huge but lowered the resolution, or in this case, they kept the resolution high but lowered the size. So when this actually gets printed, it'll get printed to size by feet. It's just the resolution's probably lower then. And yes, it could look a little pixelated if you were that close. You just don't ever notice it. As far as color mode, the color mode is determined from our vendor. So they're printing it. So they tell us the color mode they want. So they're using a CMYK printer. So they want the color mode to be CMYK. And yeah, that's the file you use. When you start designing, this is a layer here that's like template, do not print. So you actually don't print that. This layer will get turned off. It's just for you to know. So you do not have to use that blue background. Just turn that whole layer off. This is where your artwork goes. You can start fresh. Whatever you determine that background's going to be, it's not going to be that. You're going to be using Southwest Tech colors. You'll learn that in the client interview. But whatever you determine that background color is going to be, you get to fill that in here and you'll get started. And then down the road, if you're like, okay, am I following their guidelines, right? I mean, I'd have to move that layer on top to make sure that, yeah, stuff is there. But you'll end up just hiding that layer. So it's only there initially. So here's a um, like another Lamar file kind of showing you a little bit about their template. The formats they accept are TIFFs, PSD, PDF, AI. That's their size. So in the end, the resolution's 288, but the template file you have is at 300. Um, they're giving you that in pixels and they're telling you the color profile. So when you're working with a vendor, you have to communicate with that vendor to find out what they need, what they accept, what their standards are. You often as a designer, you don't just get to make that stuff up. It's your vendor that you're going to ask, hey, what do you need? You know, even if I was designing an invite for a graduation party, I would probably be working, if I've never done it before, I'm probably going to print that somewhere and I would go talk to that printer and be like, hey, what color mode do you need that in? Is that you need CMYK? You would assume CMYK because they're printing it, but there are some RGB printers, especially if it's a photography printer. So it's just good to have that conversation with your printer the first time you ever do that. Another part that I can show you is a little bit of what the proof from the vendor looks like. So this is what comes to our marketing department. They send the work in, they kind of come back and say, hey, like this is what that's going to look like. And then you go through that process of approving it. So that way you can kind of see and get an idea. They even show you next to a competitor, which is kind of nice. And focusing on, yeah, big, large. So what I hope you take away from that is like, yeah, big, large text, big, large logo. Like you're driving. You don't have a lot of time to process this information. So it's quick. It's got to be catchy right away. And I think the mock-up is super helpful. That's why you're gonna provide a mock-up to kind of show, hey, this is what your billboard's gonna look like. Okay, what are some things that's been done in the past? This is going to be part of your research and inspiration that you go look at other billboards. They don't have to be Southwest Tech billboards that you use to find your inspiration. They can just be other schools. They could be anything. That could be that McDonald's billboard you just saw there. I don't know if that would work for this because we need to highlight a student, but if I just scroll through some of the photos here on our Southwest Tech page, I'm sure we have highlighted some of these billboards in the past. You might have to dig through them a bit, but here's one. So these are last year's students whose billboards were selected. This was the hired before graduation billboard that was selected. There's also another campaign that we do. And so the other one is I graduated with zero debt. That's not the one you're doing though, but this is the billboard that was selected there. And this student actually, Angelina, she's a Start College Now student and her billboard was selected for that campaign. So that was really exciting. And so that's a placeholder image that she's using. She was using her name as a placeholder name in her program. And then this image can get swapped out from the marketing department when they have that actual image. And if you keep going further, I'm sure you can find billboards from the year before. And possibly the year before that as well. We've been doing this for a few years now. So like I said, if you kind of keep searching, you might find more of those billboards in there if you're interested. I know there's a group of 3 from Cuba City in here somewhere whose billboards were selected the year before that. This looks like one of them. She actually got a photo. Actually, that is not one. That's a good Southwest Tech billboard. It's just one of our students, but that's not one of the billboards for our campaign. but it could be a good inspiration one. Here's one where so and that's what's cool. That's why this is such a cool project because this student saw his billboard go up with his layout design and like it's just really cool and had, you know, wanted his picture taken with it. Actually, this was his concept he sent to the marketing department. So that's his placeholder image, which could have been a cutout. And then the image that was actually used, which I do think in this one is a cutout. So you kind of get to see how that works. Okay. I don't want to do too much of that for you, but I did want you to show you that if you search through there, they're there. Encourage you then to go head over to that client interview, watch that or read all the notes from the client interview, ask questions if you have it, move on to the sketches, then get all that stuff turned in by their due dates, and then watch the next video and I'll actually pull that template back in. I will be talking about some of those things you're going to be learning in your client interview, like when it comes to the logos and the colors and a few of those other aspects. I'll be mentioning that in my next video. So until next time.